Relations with Saudi Arabia are hanging by a thread with the murder of a Washington Post journalist, but is blocking an arms deal that is worth billions of dollars to Raytheon, a Massachusetts company, and putting thousands of jobs on the line worth the sacrifice in order to make a statement to the rest of the world?
So I want to start with a little context around this. The person who was killed was not just a random person. It was a member of the press. And the reason that he was killed by Saudi Arabia is because he asked hard questions. And that's a problem worldwide. Dictatorships don't like people who ask hard questions. Authoritarians don't like people who ask hard questions. And when the Saudis killed him, they sent a message to the rest of the world. No one shall ask them hard questions. That means that it is up to the rest of the world to respond, not just the United States alone, but the whole world. All countries that are trying to support democracy, all countries that believe that leaders should be held accountable, that governments should be accountable to the people, not just to the powerful. All of them need to make a response to Saudi Arabia. We need a comprehensive, integrated response that is multinational, not just to have this fall on one company or one state or one group of workers. We need something that works for all of us. And right now, the Trump administration is not trying to put anything together. Instead, has been backpedaling, trying to find ways to let the Saudis off the hook. If Donald Trump lets the Saudis off the hook, doesn't put together an international coalition, then he is declaring that for any country, any dictator who doesn't like the tough questions asked by the press, they can take steps to shut it down.
So the arms deal should be blocked, should be pulled?
So my point is we need to do this together. We need an international response.
But you're not saying whether the arms deal should be pulled at this point?
It could be part of it. The point is an international response. This is not an affront just to the United States of America. We should be leading the nations of the world to say that a free press is part of how democracy works. It's part of the accountability in the system.
Representative Deal, what's your take on this?
Look, we've got companies in Massachusetts like Raytheon that benefit from arms contracts around the globe. And whether they have contracts with Saudi Arabia or not, that should not play a factor into what's going on. Saudi Arabia has acted in a horrible manner in this case, and they should be held accountable by the United States and by other countries that want to see journalism kept free, the questions allowed to be asked, even if they are tough questions to leaders in different countries. But the other fact of the matter is Saudi Arabia is also a partner in trying to prevent terrorism in the region. Israel, one of our strongest partners in the world, is so close by, and they are one of our strong allies. To have Saudi Arabia trying to keep terrorism in Yemen at check and other regions nearby at check, I think we need to hopefully get back to a relationship that allows them to be a partner with us for the future, but never let an atrocity like this happen again. And
what about the arms deal? Should it be pulled or not?
Look, if it looks like the leadership of the country either committed this act or approved of this act being committed and they don't change leadership, then we have to, I think we need to make some statement, and pulling that deal may be one of the ways to signal that.